So in the World Peace episode, we announced the commencement of World Peace Summits.
The World Peace Summit is a seriously wrong project where we bring people from dissonant ideologies and use thinking tools and positive regard to try to find the middle ground, the string that ties the two together.
Yeah, and if not agreement between the two, like maybe to just foster some warm feelings and some understanding of the other person's side, I think is a good goal to strive towards. That's probably easier than getting people who strongly disagree to agree, getting them to be like, oh, okay, I recognize that you're also a human, and
there's room on Earth for some people to think what you think and some people to think what I think, and there's never going to have to be a war.
Yeah, like that's the ideal. That's the World Peace Summit. That's what we're making the progress.
Aaron and I have a little piece of chaos magic we're working on, where we repeatedly say 1,000 episodes, 1,000 years of world peace. And the idea is that once we hit 1,000 episodes, then humanity is going to enter a new era, and there'll be 1,000 years of world peace.
And part of the chaos magic we're working is taking steps in physical reality to actually do that. And those steps include having world peace summits, because we believe that by using a lot of these ideas and cognitive tools that we've developed, we can make strides towards world peace. All they need to do over in Iraq is for ISIS and Israel or something to do some nonviolent communication. Solve the problem. Got to send Marshall Rosenberg over there. This episode of the Seriously Wrong podcast is brought to you by the concept of agreeing to almost agree. You're pretty much close enough anyway. You might as well just, be friends, be cool, be happy. It's cool, it's nice, it's fun. Agreeing to almost agree. That's the plan. Now, this specific one was recorded way before we even recorded the World Peace episode. It was recorded back when we recorded like episode 2 or 3 and had not developed all of these cognitive toolkit tools that we now have.
When we recorded this, I'd never heard of the idea of nonviolent communication.
Right.
At all.
Well, and it was like, at first we were like, okay, no, first we have to announce the World Peace Summit, so we have to do the World Peace episode first, and then it just kind of kept having other episodes to release. We're just creative fountains of amazement. So I mean, it's
just spraying your oral cavities. Oral, yeah. Oral, you need to specify oral cavities with hot information content.
Yeah. So. Okay, over the course of these like 20 some whatever episodes that we've done so far, I feel like we've built something here between us that this podcast has grown into that was not present when this was recorded, and I think that context is important when listening to it. Basically, I went into it thinking, I'm going to see if I can try and find some common ground. And I had a few like questions that I thought might help direct it in that way. But for the most part, I just let them talk and explain their positions and why they disagreed. And it's a really interesting discussion about anarchism and the schism between like traditional socialist anarchism, the what was historically called anarchism, and what has now arisen as a very like strong libertarian anarcho-capitalist anarchism. And I was worried that my skill set when we recorded it wasn't good enough for it to be a real World Peace Summit. So it's like a proto World Peace Summit. It's like T-1 of the World Peace Summit.
Yeah, this is World Peace Summit 0.
Yeah.
This is like a prequel.
Yeah, the prequel. The interview is like half an hour long, and then after that, Shawn and I discussed the interview. He had some concerns about a lot of the points that were brought up, and
absolutely,
I took on the role of defending anarcho-capitalism for the most part. You'll hear. So here we go. This is World Peace Summit 0. The next one's going to be way more world peacier, but this is interesting to listen to, and you're going to love it. Thank you. Yeah, okay, so the two guests I brought on that you're going to hear from right away are Cameron Watt, who has a YouTube channel called Libertarian, Socialist, Rants, and he's the gentleman with the British accent that you will hear, and then the other one is Robert Kruger, who has a YouTube channel called We Were Deceived and does a Google Hangout show called The Anarchist Experience every Saturday. I think there will be links to all those things in the description.
And we were deceived as the ANCAP? And
yes. Yeah. Libertarian Socialist Rants is the Socialist, and We Were Deceived is an anarcho-capitalist. Robert Kruger, and he has an American accent, or as we call it over here, sounds normal. No offense to you, Cameron, at all.
Yeah. Also, I've listened to this ahead of time, and I'll just give a mild trigger warning that the subject of sexual assault and rape comes up early on, and it's kind of a rhetorical sticking point because rape is the embodiment of evilness, so it's used for the sake of discussion.
So we'll jump into this wonderful, full of agreement, common ground, beautiful discussion. Oh my God, we're all so fucking wrong. I find it interesting that we're all anarchists. We all think, involuntary hierarchies who enforce themselves through violence are illegitimate. And I just think it's funny that even a group that is as specialized as anarchists gets these incredibly deep divides in it where it seems like there's absolutely no agreement between the two groups because all you ever talk about are the things that the aspects that you don't agree with, whereas there are all these areas of overlap that compared to 90% of the other people, there's a whole lot of agreement. But that's not what makes for good Facebook debates or interesting conversations. But I think sometimes there's value in taking a step back and being like, oh hey, well we all think that people should be free to govern themselves through voluntary associations and kind of decide for themselves how they want to run their lives. I think that's an important area where anarchists agree of either sort of disposition, the right capitalist or the leftist collectivist sides of the coin there. So the first thing I wanted to ask you both is, what's your favorite part? What's the thing that you find the most value in the other person's position? And if you can, try not to make it like a backhanded insult where you're like, well, my favorite thing about capitalism is that it taught me that I don't want to be an exploitative asshole, or my favorite thing about collectivism is it taught me that you can't force people to do anything and force people to share with each other. But let's see what you guys think. I don't know who wants to go first, if either of you have anything in mind for that.
Who wants to go first for this one?
Go ahead.
Well, I have numerous disagreements with ANCAP ideas. I would say that the only point of agreement for me would be regarding just the abolition of the state. And that's pretty much it.
For me, I would say that the anarcho-socialist position is one that accepts that the initiation of violence is immoral and accepts the non-aggression principle. This philosophy is agreed to by both sides, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, I think most people in the socialist, anarcho-socialist camp will say that they don't want to force anybody to be part of their collective. It's all voluntary associations. The other opening question I wanted to ask, which doesn't have as much to do with the topic as it does to do with the theme of our podcast, and that is, what's the wrongest you've ever been in your life? And we'll go with Robert first, since Cameron went first last time.
At one point in time, I thought that if necessary, it would be okay to limit a woman's freedom to control her body, so that an innocent human life was not killed. And I've come to the assessment that me using violence or force to prohibit a woman from exercising choice over her own body and opting out of an interest in having a child is not my business, that I have no claim to pursue there, that there is no chance for me to somehow legitimize the use of force there.
Interesting. So what about you, Cameron?
Wrongest I've ever been. Basically, for my first sort of political viewpoint was very, very conservative and really incredibly ignorant. I kind of bought into all of this sort of right-wing talk about political correctness gone mad, a whole list of things really, which I just completely cringe just talking about. My blind support of the existing educational system. There was one thing, there was this curriculum for excellence thing that's happening in our schools at the moment, and it's still awful, but basically the idea was to get away from the standardized testing approach to a certain extent. And I was like, oh, no, how is this going to be useful if I'm going to do an exam? It's like, oh, fuck's sake, you're an idiot. You're a fucking idiot, you know. Oh, and also I was a climate denier for a while. Yeah, basically just towing the line of the ultra-conservative right for a while, although thankfully I'm kind of away from that now, and basically the exact opposite.
Okay, cool. So
that's
then,
certainly the wrongest I've ever been.
yeah, there was a couple things there. you had a lot of perceived wrongness in your history. Okay, so then I just had a few questions for one or the other of you, and I'll ask them, and then I can kind of let the other one jump in. If you have something to say about what they're saying, feel free to give your thoughts as well. So this one kind of goes back to what Robert said, but my first question was for Cameron, which was that I assume, or I believe you probably accept the basic premise of voluntarism and of the non-aggression principle. It's something that anarcho-capitalists make central to their philosophy and to they call themselves voluntarists. It's kind of their main point. The sticking point of their whole philosophy is, hey, we shouldn't initiate force against each other. Don't hit, don't steal, don't rape, don't force people to do things without their consent. And I feel like that's something pretty much everyone can agree with.
Well, there are a few points that I would probably be more critical in this respect. Would I say that it's the case that when people associate together, it should not be under compulsion? And I agree with that. However, I think it's important to distinguish between voluntary association and free association. So suppose that someone was offered a contract that said, you have permission to rape me, right, within any time in the near future, within the next 5 months, for example. And, you know, the person signed that and said, yeah, okay, you have permission to do that. Even if in the future they don't consent and they say, no, stop it, right? In that instance, I think that would be an example of a relationship which, even though they might have entered into it consensually in terms of signing some contract, it's not free association because they're not remaining self-directed as they are in that within that contract. So that's why I distinguish between voluntary association and free association.
So do you kind of disagree with the whole notion of binding contract then, that people should be held to their word if they, I mean, because technically if this person agreed to be raped, it's not rape. If you're agreeing to it, it's more rape play.
The point is that if they later disagree, or if it's not like saying you have the permission to penetrate me, regardless of whether I agree at the time, that is a lack of autonomy there. And to me, I don't think that would be permissible.
Oh, okay. So like a contract that signs away your autonomy is sort of invalid.
Yeah, okay. It's more to do with what constitutes freedom, and is that it's not just a matter of agreeing to something without having a gun pointed at your head. It's more of a continual thing, and that there are certain conditions that need to be met. So it might be the case that someone signs a contract, but it's still not a free agreement because they are not autonomous within the contract. And the position is that people should be autonomous.
I would comment on this, that each person's own subjective value of what it is that they find to be a permissible state of affairs for what they agree to, what they no longer agree to, has to determine that for themselves. There may be someone who is a sadomasochist who specifically wants to experience a abuse of their person in some sexual fashion. They may find this particularly pleasurable if they can resist with all their might, but not be able to actually resist. Some people find this erotic. I don't. I cannot place my value system upon them, and so if they choose to make such an arrangement, that is entirely within their purview. And if they've made an agreement with someone else that they then later want to vacate, if they made a contract that did not provide for such, getting out of that agreement, then that is the type of thing that you kind of grow as a society to understand that, all right, well, you got to cover your ass on these things as people screw up, and we start to develop a societal norm where people won't accept contracts in a, let's say if you're going to be an arbitration service, you won't accept people's contracts that allow for those types of relationships without having a safe word, for example, where the person can say, nope, game over, I'm not doing this.
And that would sort of preserve the autonomy that Cameron's talking about.
Right.
Right.
The fact is that when you make a decision and you're going to abide by it in perpetuity and it's going to be a forever type of thing, that's a pretty significant decision. If you're going to do it for a limited period of time, a lot less significant.
It's more to do with, if you're talking about breaking up a contract, which violates autonomy to that kind of a degree, it's not something that, like, if there was to be aggression in that instance, it would not be against the person whose autonomy is being limited, but rather the person who is limiting the autonomy. So, for example, if you have the contract that I was mentioning before, the idea of a voluntary rape contract, in that instance, if you wanted to break up that contract, then force would be used against a rapist rather than the victim.
Right, because it's considered force to not hold up your end of a contract.
Mm-hmm. So I would say that free association, in terms of relationships in which people are autonomous, are more important than voluntary association.
Well, sure. But the bottom line is that if someone chooses to create a relationship that is subjugating themselves to another, they are within their rights to do so. The thing is that they always can breach that contract and suffer the consequences of the breach of contract. And then they can also go to arbitration as to the contract breach. What is the loss that is incurred there? Let's say, for the sake of argument, that I contract with someone to have them rescue certain people from a plight that I think is very significant. In exchange for this, I offer up my kidney as payment. Now, it turns out that my kidney is the only kidney in our particular region that matches his blood type and specific whatever, because of whatever reasons, just because we're going to make this obnoxious. So I promise to give him my kidney. The person rescues the people from this dangerous situation, saving their lives, but now he was going to die without my kidney. And I say, well, no, I don't agree to having my body penetrated by this knife, to have my kidney being removed. I'm expressing my autonomy, and I am not going to accept this contract. Well, that to me is fraud, and the penalty for the fraud would be equivalent to at least a kidney, plus the cost of having to persecute the fraud. So then this person actually could use force against me to take my kidney, and that would be legitimate.
I'm just seeing these fights with knives and people ripping kidneys out of each other, and this is fun. Voluntary rape and kidney theft. Awesome. I'm going to move on to the next question I had. So this one was for Robert. I wanted to make the argument that while we cannot force people to help each other out in any way, I agree that that's illegitimate. You can't make somebody give anybody anything. That it's actually in our self-interest to do so, to be generous and to be charitable, to have solidarity with our community, because basically it's just who wants to live in a community where nobody is generous with one another. When somebody is down on their luck, they don't get help from the people around them. I'm not saying that it should be a requirement that people with guns should come and make you do, but I think it's a necessary thing in order to have a free and autonomous society. It's partially self-protection against the psychological aspects that come with terrible poverty, and people might attack you. It's going to make it a worse place to live. I just think a lot of people caricature capitalists as a bunch of spoiled brats who don't want to share anything with anyone, who want to have their big fence and their pile of stuff. But my reading of it is that they just don't want to be forced to share anything or forced to agree to do anything that they don't actually agree with in the moment.
I would say that that's correct. I think that coming together in a fashion to protect someone who's fallen down on bad times, to assist them, is definitely something that as a species we have evolved to do. I think that it's a standard within human beings to feel compassion and empathy. There are certainly outliers that don't. And I think that because of the societal norm, you would probably see that the people who are less willing to assist others in need may be less respected in the society, and maybe not.
Well, you can sort of look at the government and the wealthy, and
Well, but of course,
hail.
That's because we're dealing with a mythology system. I mean, we basically, at some point in time, human beings figured out that there's stuff out there that we don't understand, so we should be scared of it, and God's going to kill you. At that point, when we decided that the guy who's really smart and who comes up with a plausible story that tells us that he knows how to keep God from killing us, ended up being able to use that fear over the rest of us. And we went from the divine right of kings to the divine right of paper to the divine right of the mob. We have a mythology that occurs with this concept of the right to rule over others. And that's where we see a lot of these problems. Now, as far as the idea that we should
it's in our self-interest to maintain a community where people support each other.
Oh yes,
that was my point. Yeah,
it's definitely within our self-interest. I would say that the biggest thing, though, that a lot of anarcho-socialists or ANCOMs refuse to acknowledge is that in order to be charitable, you have to have surplus. So the economic models by which you'll see surplus occur are those that accept that the person is the owner of the fruits of their labor, aka capitalism.
Firstly, regarding surpluses, there's a kind of general sort of consensus that charity and solidarity are kind of different things. This idea of charity, a lot of the time, is basically the idea that people from above will give to the people below, and it's up to them to decide whether or not that person has the means to live. And charity is kind of top down in that respect, in that it's really there to kind of boost the ego of the person at the top rather than genuinely help the person from below. Whereas solidarity, on the other hand, is to do with people at the bottom organizing together to improve their own condition. So, for example, charity would be like a boss deciding, oh, maybe I should raise their wages a bit. Whereas solidarity would be unions getting together and organizing, going on strike to get a rise, rather than just based on whether the boss says, maybe I will, maybe I won't,
Okay. I would say that that's actually two different concepts. That what we're talking about as far as the negotiation of wages is a completely different thing. It's a negotiation for trade is essentially what's going on there. It's this negotiation that occurs between a buyer and a seller of a service, and that's not the same concept. The concept that I'm talking about is if you have a person who is in want, a person who has and a person who needs, in order for a person who has to be able to assist the person who is in need, the person who has to have surplus, because if the person has, let's say, just enough food to survive, to live on, and the other person is starving, if the first person who has that gives up his food to the other to keep him from starving, then he himself starves, and we still have a starvation that occurs. And it's about preventing the starvation. That is the goal of whether it's you call it solidarity or whether I call it charity. The point is that if we are going to get rid of the unnecessary, undesirable, unfulfilled want that occurs as a product of nature, in order to satisfy that, we need to have extra coat laying around to give to the kid. We've got to have some extra food laying around to give to the child.
Yeah, but I think that you're saying that anarcho-socialists do not recognize that, because it's not.
I would say that they recognize that you want to have that, but I don't think that they recognize what generates.
No, I would say that it's not necessarily the case that capitalism is the only method of production which can produce more than just necessity. To me, I'm not really sort of convinced by that.
No, I wouldn't say that it's not the only method. I would say that it is the most effective method. By having a system where you have competitive cooperation, you have multiple systems competing to decide which method of cooperation occurs. It works best. You don't know whether it is going to be best if you have your cooperation being a horizontal structure or a vertical structure in the case of providing, let's say, food. But by having competitive cooperation, you can have a horizontal structured system where all of the workers that are in a particular group work together as equals, and they have no boss that leads them in any particular fashion. They have a consensus on whether it is best to grow this particular crop or that particular crop, and how best to meet the needs of the people that are around them who are asking for these products. That's going to compete with another system that's going to have a person who is in a leadership role, who has, let's say, accumulated an amount of expertise through the period of time as working, let's say, in his own farm with his children or with his family or with his friends. And he's found that when he's given the reins, when he actually is one that gets to decide what's going on, he's better at it than other people. So this specialization of labor that occurs where people have insight into how to best meet needs for the community may end up being someone that people refer to and default to. You know, when he talks, people listen because he's right more often than the rest of us. It helps the community.
I just wanted to jump in here because what you're talking about just completely overlaps with the next question I wanted to ask Cameron anyway, so then he can respond to that. And it had to do with, again, like hierarchical versus horizontal structures in the workplace. And it also goes back to whether, or what you were saying earlier, Cameron, about whether simply a voluntary association is sufficient or whether the agreement behind the association has to include autonomy. I think it's going to touch back on that. But just the example I like to bring up, because it feels different than a factory example or a farming example, is a film. If someone is making a film, and if I'm the director of the film, should it really be a democratically produced thing where all the extras and the cameramen all get equal pay and an equal vote over how some person should deliver a particular line or how a certain scene should be lit or edited, or the idea that there are specialized positions within workplace that maybe deserve higher pay? Like the director of the film this is their vision. Like, say they're the writer and they're the director. This is their film basically, and these other people have agreed to help them achieve their vision of getting this movie made. So he's sort of the boss in that situation, and I think that is a valid contract for them to enter into, where they don't get to choose what they're doing on that film set because they're there to serve the desires of the visionary who wants to bring his film to light. And if they don't like what's going on, they can obviously leave and not be part of that film anymore. And I think you can kind of apply that same logic to like say an Apple, the vision of Steve Jobs, or like any sort of production or business concern as well. But I think the film example kind of puts it in a different light, because we tend to think of films and artistic things as being that there being a visionary person behind it, or at least those being the best sorts of art. Art by committee, where all these producers and all these television execs get involved, tends to be less awesome than art with a strong visionary person behind it.
Well, from my perspective, I think it's important to distinguish between rational authority and irrational authority. So, and this really ties in with how I would view freedom. So, for me, my view of freedom is being able to rationally decide what to do with yourself. And basically, with the views of authority, you can sort of distinguish between a kind of authority which is to do with you rationally deciding to go along with what someone else is saying because you have kind of thought about it and you've considered the arguments that they've made and all the rest of it. And I think that there's a distinction between that and a kind of authority which involves basically having to submit to someone and obey them on the grounds of their monetary wealth or their accumulation and everything else. Again, the quote from Bookchin sums up pretty well. Does it follow that I reject all authority? Far from me such a thought. In the matter of boots, I refer to the authority of the bootmaker. Concerning houses, canals, or railroads, I consult that of the architect or the engineer. And he goes on through a whole series of examples. But I know neither the bootmaker, nor the architect, nor the savant to impose his authority upon me. I listen to them freely and with the respect merited by their intelligence, their character, their knowledge, reserving always my incontestable right of criticism and censure. I do not content myself with consulting a single authority in any special branch. I consult several, I compare their opinions and choose that which seems to me the soundest. But I recognize no infallible authority. That's kind of, the distinction that I would make.
Sure, yeah. So how do you think that applies in a workplace scenario where maybe there is the head bootmaker who knows how to make the most awesomest boots of all, and whether his employees, they're not forced to be there, obviously, but while they are there, they're choosing to submit to his... maybe submit is a charged word to use there, but they're choosing to go along with his vision and his bootmaking ideas and how it should be done. I think that's how most capitalists view a workplace scenario, is that you're voluntarily choosing to enter into this hierarchical relationship because it is the kind of hierarchy that you're describing there. It is the kind of rational submission to someone who has more knowledge or vision than you do.
No, I really don't think that that's sort of the case. I mean, I would say that in a kind of more socialist workplace where it would be run as a co-op, for example, there might be someone who has some good ideas, but whether that would mean that they have to own everything, whether they get to own the means of production and have a system in which wealth is just pumped upwards towards them, I wouldn't say that that's justified. I would just say that, okay, they have some competence and that's fine, but that doesn't mean that we have to make everything very, very stratified in the sense that, or even just a little bit. I wouldn't say that. I would just say that it should be based on reason. I don't think that it's necessarily the case that just because someone might be competent, I don't think that that kind of authority would merit ownership of means of production.
Okay, I had a question about the means of production. Now, obviously we know that somebody can own the fruits of their labor if they go out into the wild forest where nobody lives and nobody goes, and they take down a tree and they make a chair. It's theirs. Then, additionally, they can sell the chair. We know that they can do that. But they could also, instead of making a chair, they could make a tool. They could make a net. Now, in the case of a chair or a net, let's say that I've got a neighbor who would like to borrow my chair or net. I can make an agreement with them in order to receive some sort of compensation for potential wear and tear that occurs on the chair or the net. So they say, all right, well, I'll pay you such and such amount of money to borrow your chair or your net. Then, now we have a situation where I can rent a tool. Now, obviously, we also accept that people can own their own domiciles, their own homes. Now, you can put tools inside of the domicile, like an oven, let's say, for example. And if you can rent to someone the use of your tools and the use of your domicile, why can you not make another arrangement by which they agree to let you sell the stuff that they're going to produce in exchange for a guarantee of a certain amount of funds for their labors? This idea that it is somehow a wage slavery that occurs when a person owns the means of production is basically, it is an inconsistency between the idea that somebody can own the fruits of their labor, but they can't own the means of production. I own the chair that I made, but I don't own the net that I made.
It's kind of a fuzzy distinction there, is what you're saying?
To me, there is no distinction.
Well, between personal and private property?
Between the means of production, I have in my own personal property means of production.
Okay, I have a problem with that because that's just one action. It's not an economic system.
So what about his net example? Like if he has a net and he wants to pay somebody to go out and fish for him using his net?
That's a kind of difficult one because it might be intended for your use as well, or...
Of course it is, absolutely. I'm saying to the person, here, I've got a net.
And then it might be the case that you have the prior claim.
Well, but I made the net.
But it depends how or... Yeah.
So here's the deal. You've got the ability to go out with the hands and fish, or with a fishing line, and catch, let's say, 3 fish or 5 fish over the course of a day. So you're catching 5 fish over the course of the day, and with a net, you're catching, let's say, 18 fish. Now I ask you for 10 of those fish per day in exchange for using my net. Now you have 8 fish with the same amount of labor that you were going to put in with your own hands because of my net. So you're prospering and I'm prospering.
So what do you think, Robert, about... I think my understanding, the major objection that socialists have to the people owning the means of production is that somehow you've accumulated this capital, you own a factory, say, and now you have this resource that you can plumb to exploit workers who maybe have no other opportunities anywhere else. You can pay them less than a living wage to work at your factory while you sit back and collect a ton of money, while maybe they are the ones who are doing all the actual work. Maybe you inherited this factory, or you found it or something. Let's say you didn't do too much work to earn it. Do you think there's any need to deal with the question of exploitation or workers' rights, and whether exploitative agreements can be made in which the autonomy of the workers is being infringed upon because there's structural aspects where they have no other options available to them?
Sure. Here's the thing. When you're dealing with a person who is, let's say, an owner of a factory, they're born into it, they just got it. First of all, that's not any different than them being born into a home and owning the house that their parents left them. They don't have to provide for their own shelter anymore, but other people might. So there's a disparity there, but somehow it's special because it's a means of production. Well, that's
because the means of production are intended for social use by a large group of people. Well,
the means of production are still property. They're still owned by someone because they produced them. They made them in the first place. And if they want to bequeath them onto their children, their heirs, instead of destroying them before death so that they don't, why would...
No, but if you're saying that someone's just inherited it.
Right. But their parents worked.
And it's not the case that it's not the product of their labor.
Right. You can give other people...
So how is it still legitimate that they get to own it?
Because I can gift you something and it's legitimate.
Although in that situation, though, you end up developing into a class system.
Actually, you don't. In the case of a business owner, the business owner, if the business does not succeed, if the business fails, he goes either bankrupt or he loses his investment and some. The protectionism that occurs when you have a limited liability corporation, that is where you see that the big cats can get away with taking risks and putting all of the costs and burdens upon the employees that he has, and running away with big wealth whilst the employees are basically shit out of luck. So when you have a person who has employees and he has investors that he is obliged to, if the business fails, he fails. And this is not the case when you have a government system. In fact, a government system is basically creating a commons, and anyone and everyone is welcome to try to obtain the power and money that is available in this trough called government. And what happens is that you get these really big sows that come over to the trough and they gorge themselves, and all the little piggies end up starving, and you end up getting these really big, gigantic sows that can take the trough and eat from it any time that they want.
That's an interesting analogy, because I feel like that's what a lot of socialists would feel like capitalism is.
Is this the sort of, oh, well, we have corporatism and not capitalism? Is it that kind of line of argument, or
what it is
that you're making, or
what happens if you create a tragedy of the commons? If you create a tragedy of the commons on power and money,
I don't see how that sort of, to me, like, it's not the case that everyone has an equal capacity to use the state.
Oh, they don't.
No. So I don't see how that would be an example of commons.
Commons, there is a rancher who has 45 head of cattle, and there's a rancher who has, let's say, 1,000 sheep. They don't have an equivalent ability to use the grass that's on the plains. One has a significantly bigger ability to use the grass that's on the plains. In fact, when he does, leaves nothing left for the other one at all. And the same thing is true of the large, powerful corporate interests like Monsanto. They're going to go to the government and they're going to find various different people who are going to listen to their positions as a result of being paid to do so. And they will take that commons and direct it to pass laws which protect their interests. And the only way to fight against it is to get enough people to go into the commons and eat of it first. And given that there is no, I mean, that we have such small little piggies running around in comparison with these gigantic sows, there's really no way for us even to get into the trough now.
Okay, so I have to begin to wrap this up, but at least in terms of agreement, I think we agreed that rape contracts should have a safe word, and that it's nice to help each other out. So maybe there's some little bits of agreement there among all of that disagreement. But I'll give you each a little moment here to give some final thoughts, or if you want to comment on what Robert was just saying, Cameron, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, okay. I suppose there's this sort of tendency when people make this sort of, oh, we have this corporatism rather than capitalism. The fact that corporations go into the state and use it to further their own interests is the fault of the state. To me, it really ignores the general tendency for power consolidation in a capitalist system, and the fact that there are centers of economic power which compete to pursue their own interests, often at the expense of the rest of the population, and that it's not just the state, it's also capitalist organizations that are involved in sort of consolidating power and getting everyone else to do their bidding. I don't think that that's just because of the government, but rather I would say that it's just a general tendency of market systems to do that. In terms of my conclusions, I would say that historically the state and the market system, or at least the capitalist market system, because there are other kinds of market systems you can have which aren't based on capitalism, like mutualism, for example. Historically, they've always gone hand in hand, and to me, getting rid of one means you have to get rid of the other. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, for my wrap-up, I would say that if you're going to accept the principle that someone is the owner of their fruits of their labor, they're the person who actually made it. So they own that, and they can make arrangements with other people on how to use those resources that they have produced, and these agreements can consist of whatever different arrangements that you would like. Mutualism, whether it can be a hierarchical or a more flat, more egalitarian type of situation. Each person owns what they've produced. Now that means that it's possible to actually create and own a building and the means of production. And if you're going to accept the initial tenet, the initial principle, then you have to accept that that is a consequence of that initial principle, that you own the fruits of your labor. Then moving from that, the idea that we are going to get a subclass of people who are going to be bred in as workers, who are only going to exist as workers, is a conclusionist-based position. It is not based upon the actual principles that you initially establish. If you own the fruits of your labor, you don't initiate violence, that's capitalism. You can choose to be mutualistic, you can choose to be hierarchical, and if people like it, they'll use it. Provide alternatives, but don't force me to give up the fruits of my labor for your plan of how it should work.
Okay. Awesome. I don't have anything else to say, so that's good. I thank you guys so much for doing this with me. I appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Awesome. Welcome to the Narcissism of Small Differences Radio Theater. Oh, hey man, you listening to some Kanye?
Yeah, I listen to Kanye West every day.
Me too.
He's my
love
living hero.
Kanye.
What?
But I just hear you're listening to Yeezus, and
Yeah,
I mean, it kind of a disappointment, eh?
No, Jesus is the greatest album of all time.
No. It's
really fucked up you'd say that.
No, man, it's College Dropout. College Dropout is totally like the Kanye album. I mean, Yeezus, like, props him for trying. But
you're a living monster. You're inhuman.
Yeah, whatever, bro. Guess what? You're not invited to my Kanye party next week.
Hey, man, you reading some Karl Marx?
Yeah. I'm actually just going through Capital for the second time.
Oh, shit, man.
It felt like it really, needed a second reading. It's so powerful. It's like...
Another communist in my poli-sci class. That's so perfect.
Yeah, that is really awesome. It's
really
great
nice
to meet you,
man.
So
you're a Marxist-Leninist, right?
Well, no. I mean, Lenin obviously kind of caused a lot of problems.
Okay, you sit over there. I want to be alone. I would rather be alone than be with the type of Marxist you are.
Hey, man, do you want a Gatorade?
No, I only drink Powerade. So screw you.
Oh, fuck. That's just like Red Disgusting, and Gatorade is amazing.
Yeah, Red Disgusting is the name of Gatorade.
Yeah, that's what you would think.
You would think that. You do think that. The opposite of what you just said, I think, which is yours is the wrong one.
You want to fight?
Yes, I would like to physically fight.
Yeah, let's physically fight.
Let's physically fight. Hey, do you like sports?
Of course. I love sports.
That's awesome, man. We both like sports. I'm sensing the beginning of a friendship.
So I think to kick off our new friendship, we should go shoot some hoops.
Oh, basketball?
Well, I mean, it is the best of all the sports.
Okay, well, I wouldn't say that. I definitely disagree with that.
Well, what other sport has the highest amount of goals?
Lacrosse.
That's not true.
Lacrosse.
No.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that sport is, and I'm sure that you
It's
get
a
two
really
for
good
a
sport.
regular shot in basketball, and they happen all the time.
You want to physically fight about this?
Of course I want to physically fight about this.
You want to physically fight and perform our genders, bro?
Yeah, I would totally question your gender if you didn't want to physically fight with me right now.
Yeah, your gender expression wouldn't. If you didn't fight, that would be relevant.
So that was the discussion, and what you're gonna hear now is the post-discussion that Shawn and I recorded a little bit after that was recorded. So also back in time. That was the past. This is the present. Now we're going back to the past, into the future, or something. Thank you.
We're wrong. They're wrong. Oh my God.
So we didn't solve the question of ANCAP versus ANSocialist.
No, we did not bring everyone together to sing Kumbaya yet.
Not
on
this
podcast.
episode.
No,
Yeah.
that's next week.
So yeah, listening to that, I made some notes on some of the discussions that happened because I found the discussion very, very interesting and stimulating. First, I think that there's a very, very interesting conflation that's made between the idea that violating a contract is a type of force. There's something very, I don't understand the implications of that yet, but it definitely speaks to me that if within this understanding of force, within this description of force, there are different types of force that require different types of feedback.
Like killing someone because they broke a contract to give you jelly beans at the end of the month is
that's
maybe
quite an escalation. It's not.
yes.
And so there's like a type of double think going on there. I feel like that there's this metaphorical force, this rhetorical force of verbally saying, no, I'm out of this contract. You can't have my jelly beans.
I think the way that they would frame it is not quite that. It's like you promise to give them the jelly beans, you sign the contract. So you're basically, by not fulfilling the contract, you're stealing their jelly beans. It's the same thing as if you walked into their house and took their jar of jelly beans. Now, I don't think most anarcho-capitalists would be like, yeah, therefore you can shoot them. But they might be like, you would bring a case against them because they violated the contract and search for monetary reparations.
A social tribunal type thing?
No, private courts and private...
really? Seriously?
Yeah.
That's their perspective?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Because you would have insurance against theft.
Privately bought
Insurance against theft, yeah. And I have a decent understanding of their systems, but I'm not going to be able to defend it to the same degree that they would be able to. But I think I can add some perspective.
That's good, because I'm definitely coming at this from very much an outsider perspective, and I've done a bit of reading on this, but I did not fit my confirmation bias at all, and I was just out of there. But like when there's the discussion of the kidneys, the kidney discussion, I get this very, very visceral, deep gut, no, that's not how you run a society. No,
when he said, well, yeah, you would be able to go and take their kidney.
I don't see how you can say that you're creating an idealistic society if your society ever involves like 6 or 7 dudes pinning down one dude and cutting out his kidney.
I think here's I'm trying to my best to channel an anarcho-capitalist was that, because if you want to have a contract, it would have to be enforceable by someone, so it would need to be privately. It would be run through some company who's going to be responsible for the enforcement of that contract. So the companies who are responsible for the enforcement of contracts would maybe not be willing to accept contracts that might require them to go and steal somebody's kidney, because that is going to be bad for their image as a business, and they're going to just be like, well, no, let's write a clause into this contract where if you really need the kidney, or like, I don't know.
So yeah, but and calling all these things force, and just being like force is bad, or I know force is neutral, but initiating force is the bad part. There's something really, really creepy to me about the idea of, okay, he violated the kidney contract. This metaphorical force has been initiated, so now we're going to continue that metaphorical force using literal physical force. Like that's an elevation. That to me strikes me as initiation of a different thing.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. Or I mean, I definitely agree with you. Yeah. The reason I said I think I agree with you is because in general, I feel like I agree with the basic idea that initiating force is the wrong thing. Like, say you're having an argument with someone, the person who swings the first punch is more guilty than the person who returns the punch, or who is defending themselves from the punch.
For what it's worth, I don't think that's what Jesus would say. But
Jesus would just lay there and cower and
turn his other cheek.
But what about if you just punch that cheek and then punch it again and then punch it again?
Well, I think I remember reading that the original interpretation of turning the other cheek was like, when you're punished, when you're hit, it's not like you turn the other cheek like you're turning away from the situation. You're turning the other cheek to say, hit my other cheek too, motherfucker.
Okay. That's bad. That's way more badass than what I thought of turn the other cheek to mean.
Yeah, I like that interpretation a lot more. It's like, oh, you want to slap me? Why don't you slap me twice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there could be an argument made that this type of kidney contract wouldn't happen in the society, because contracts would be elevated to such a point that everyone knows better than to sign away something they're not serious about, or people aren't going to be making these flippant contracts and causing these situations. But even then, I have a strong inclination to think that power structure is going to, and these corporations presumably, because they're enforcing contracts, have some sort of elevated status over individuals, at least within the context of enforcing contracts.
you both signed the contract with this contract verification, whatever fucking company or whatever. So you entered into a voluntary agreement with them that they would be the arbiter to enforce make sure this contract goes through. So by signing the contract with them, you're authorizing them to make sure that the contract gets carried out. I mean, and then the argument Cameron was making was that a contract that limits your autonomy is just inherently invalid.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what a contract does, right? Is you sign away part of your autonomy in a way.
Yeah, you say, I'm going to do that. That's an interesting point. I never thought of that. It's true.
Yeah, you're getting rid of your right to change your mind in exchange for something. Okay, so let's say that we're in an anarcho-capitalist utopian future, me and you.
Okay.
And
oh, hey,
how's it going? What's up? You're dirty too, eh? Yeah, not a lot of showers here. No, I'm just kidding.
No, there would be so many showers. It would be like golden capitalist.
Well, you got to put a nickel in.
Yes. Well, I mean,
showers don't fucking run themselves, man.
You'd have to put a nickel in, but you
have to put a nickel into
like
everything.
A day's worth of work, you would make $10 million, and the shower would cost a nickel. Okay,
so let's say that you, Aaron, are a hero of the community. I know that also applies to real life, but I'm right. Okay, so you're kind of, socially elevated. You have a lot of prestige. You're charismatic. People enjoy being around you. They want to impress you. And this is something that is uncomfortable to talk about when you're talking about classless or hierarchical societies, is that there's always going to be people who are
the cool kids. I get to be a cool kid.
You're a cool kid.
Yay.
So there's always going to be people who are cool kids in different ways. And I don't think that's an innately evil force. It's something that has to be dealt with in theory, and I'm sure people have dealt with it in theory. But let's say that we're in private. We're in a room that has no cameras, no recording devices. And, I'm kind of, I'm more of a black sheep. And we're in private, and you just take out a big knife, an enormous knife. You put it to my throat, and you say, okay, Shawn, you're a son of a bitch. You sign this contract right now that says I get to take your lunch money every day, or else I'm going to fucking stab you right now. And so I'm in the situation where I realize in this hypothetical scenario, we're in private. Everyone likes you. No one really likes me. There's no way to tell what actually happened here. So if you killed me, everyone would believe you. You're going to get away with it. If
you sign the contract and then try to violate it later, saying, "Hey, he forced me at knife point to sign this," everyone's gonna be like, "No, he didn't. He's Aaron. He's awesome."
Yeah, you attention whore. You attention W word. Aaron is the bedrock of this community. He provides for all of us. How dare you? But I just don't see how it can be meaningfully resolved if it's based on how much the two of us are trusted. So, because even if it's not codified by a societal law, there's always going to be social hierarchies, group preferences, preferred groups, secret affinities.
Okay, so I was saying a private company is going to have to be the one enforcing this contract, and no private company is going to agree to enforce a contract that was signed away from them in a room with no surveillance and no recording going on, where they weren't there to verify that both
Why not?
people, because if they're going around enforcing these contracts that they have no way of verifying were voluntarily signed.
What if they have superior firepower? Because when you talk about private insurance company, I get really mafia vibes from it.
And or mercenary Blackwater.
Exactly. So they might be less interested in what people think of them, are these good guys or not, and more interested in, do people think we can fucking kill them when we want to or not, and is this contract going to be profitable? Yes. So I'm on board, because I'm not one of the good ones, because not all of them are going to turn out to be good necessarily.
I think the idea is that it would end up being more profitable to be good, and that it would cost more money to maintain this brutal, forceful situation that you're describing, because then they not only have to pay to enforce the contracts, they also have to pay to maintain this paramilitary force that is preventing them from being constantly rebelled against.
The same arguments made by free market capitalist libertarian types in the modern day that like it's more profitable to take care of the environment than to not take care of the environment in theory. But when it comes to business cycles, making quarterly reports and stuff like that, it's more profitable this cycle to be a dick.
The anarcho-capitalists will say, because there's these things called limited liability corporations where the owners can take money out, but when shit hits the fan and there's a BP oil spill, or say there's a BP oil spill times 1,000, and they have to pay to clean that up in an anarcho-capitalist society because no insurance company is going to cover them unless they're doing best practices, and the money that's at stake is the money of the owners. There's no such thing as limited liability. It's all your liability. If you're the owner of the company or a stockholder of the company, you are fucked if you do something that ends up costing a lot of money. And if you say you do a BP oil spill, then everybody who's affected by that has a legitimate claim against you and can go to your insurance company and get money from them. And so they are going to not provide you with insurance if they aren't sure that you are making sure that you're not going to BP oil spill.
But seeing as there's no like innate contract between a new baby and this corporation, I just don't see how that's really enforceable. What keeps the insurance company from just fucking off when it's time to pay out everyone?
The example that I'll hear a lot is like eBay feedback scores. If this insurance company is constantly rebuking on its things, then people are going to stop buying insurance from them because they're not fulfilling their things. Like, who is going to make an eBay account and sell 10,000 things and have a 99% feedback score just to start fucking people over?
But the demographic that's seeking out insurance, if I thought there was a good chance that I was going to cause a BP oil spill, it would be in my interest to seek an insurance company that doesn't pay out.
Yeah.
So checkmate.
I don't have an answer for you.
I'm sure he would.
I'm sure he would too. I can't believe I'm suddenly the person defending an anarcho-capitalist society. It's a crazy like double backflip brain thing for me. It's good. It's a fun exercise. I'm enjoying this.
Okay, so I wanted to respond to some of the choices and rhetoric of the anarcho-capitalists as well, just at one specific point.
Yes.
When he talks about the divine right of kings, then the divine right of paper, then the divine right of the mob to rule over others.
Yes.
When he said the mob, my first thought was like the mafia, like a private gangster organization, but I actually realized, I went back and re-listened to it, I realized that he's using it as like a pejorative euphemism for democracy, rule by the mob.
Yes.
And so,
or the collective, the idea that the collective can take people and do what they will with them, like sacrifice individuals to the good of the collective, whatever that means.
Yeah. And so I see there's two opposite connotations here between mob rule, which has this very, very negative emotional connotation. On the other side, there's like rule by people or rule by the consensus, or the word democracy, which it's the same concept through different framing.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to maybe highlight that in the discussion. Specifically, I want to bring a question to the audience, which is, okay, so individuals in our society, like citizens, us, we're being policed and governed by authorities. And then these authorities, the police and government, they're governed by the collective as a whole, using democratic processes, voting, and so on. I think it's hard for me to ask this question without heavily implying what I feel. But is this layered form of authority, is that just mob mentality, or is this a manifestation of a moral idea of self-governance? Is this an imperfect attempt at the moral idea of self-governance, or is it a frothing mob? You know, like they're right. Two extremes of the same concept. So I'm really fascinated by how it's one concept, two extreme framings to look at it from different angles, where in one light it seems like the most important, beautiful thing in the world, and in another light it seems like this brutish, like disgusting downfall of society.
Yeah, I feel like I can channel the anarcho-socialist reason why that's horrible and the anarcho-capitalist reason why that's horrible. And I think the anarcho-socialist reason why that's horrible is that the people, the government, this middle layer of the government and the police and things are not actually governed by the collective or by consensus. The nature of the hierarchy is so that they basically impose their will on the collective and the people and make it seem as though they are taking cues from them when really they aren't, because they have all the power and all the guns and all the it's not an accurate thing from that perspective to even call it democracy or rule of the collective in any way, because you don't have any legitimate control over your own situation.
I see that Robert Anton Wilson would call that a loser's script as opposed to a winner's script. It's a loser's script to assume everything's out of your control, because it's really not. Like, our votes are counted, our votes matter, and the system doesn't like work perfectly, but how is it beneficial at all? But
maybe the winner's script is we really can get rid of the government and stop this horrible machine of invalid hierarchy death.
That is a type of winner's script, but I just don't. That's better than what you were saying before. And if the two are connected, then I think it's important as people who are trying to affect the world to be functioning under the narrative that it's possible to change the world. I don't think democracy is a complete farce. I think it is compromised. I think it's very, very imperfect. But I think the disinvestment in democracy is more responsible for the socialists, anarcho-socialists have this very specific view of how democracy would work, and that is in a way the opposite of how it currently works, where we have this federal government which is the big boss, and it's a top-down thing, and their view of it is that it needs to be a bottom-up thing where each community has complete autonomous control over their own community. And there is maybe a rising up structure of some, like, I guess it's technically hierarchical, but not really, in that the top can't enforce anything downwards. It comes from the bottom up, and it starts with the workplace, and each workplace has control over their own little autonomous workplace, and then it goes to the community, and then it goes to maybe the state level. And there's councils where the states get together and like discuss things and, come to agreements and come to consensuses with representatives from each side and compromise and find ways that everyone can agree. But if your community doesn't agree, you're not being forced from any top-down view to... Because everybody else in the country voted for something, you're not going to be forced to do it. I think I have such an imperfect understanding of like real anarcho-socialism. I have such a better understanding of zeitgeistism. But I partially agree with that. I think it's definitely an interesting perspective to think of bottom up versus top down as these two dichotomous things to consider. But I strongly believe that fluidity is more important than like a universalist ideology that says one way is good and one way is bad. Because if you look at something like the United Nations, the reason that people think the United Nations sucks is because countries have too much autonomy, basically, in relation to the United Nations. The United Nations actually can't, as effectively enough, stop climate change, stop child trafficking and stuff like that, because they don't have the authority required to be top down like that.
Yeah, but they also don't have the authority required to force everyone to only have one kid, or to, I'm trying to think of something evil tyrannical government would do, to put people into internment camps and they don't have the authority to do good things, but they also don't have the authority to do bad things.
Yeah, but I don't really believe in malevolent entities, so I'm not.
But what if they mean well but do evil?
Well, what if I was wearing a hat right now? We don't know.
Sorry, the other thing I just wanted to say, like the reason why that middle layer of the the mob rule thing that like the capitalists would be against it is because the government is initiating force because they're taking your tax money, they're forcing you to participate in social programs you don't want to. They're when can you force people to do things?
All the time. Our life is a balancing act between outside forces. I'm socially forced to do so much things by social regulatory standards day by day, like wearing clothes.
But in an anarcho-capitalist society, you wouldn't have to wear clothes, unless I don't know how that would work.
Maybe I'll make a broad point on force. I think it's a very, very naive conception to say that there's an order that we can build that's going to get rid of the specter of outside forces affecting us, because something like catastrophic climate change, natural disasters, an asteroid, alien contact. There's millions and millions and millions of ways where your destiny can be taken out of your hands by things that are bigger than you. And
but those aren't other people.
I know. So this is the point that I'll make on that about other people. But I feel like I don't think that fetishizing and lifting the idea of humans having influence over other humans as like the evil of the world, I think that has more to do with the hipness of misanthropy rather than the solidity of that argument. I don't think that the initiation of force is the strongest argument for the complexity of force as something that's inevitable. I don't think it's a complete argument. I think in the future we're going to look back on it as something that's very, very simplistic and naive, and we're going to have better frameworks for understanding these kind of things. And I don't like the idea that, like, you know, force is initiated, all bets are off.
Well, I don't think there's that. I think it's like to shoot someone for taking your jelly beans would be considered initiating, like you said, kind of a whole nother level of force.
But how are these meta standards enforced? How are these standards of the insurance providers and these standards of societal, these corporations that manage these contracts, how do you enforce the enforcers?
Through the market?
To me, that's outrageous. Maybe to someone else it's not. But to me, the idea that the market's going to handle that, considering when we like...
Well, I think the idea that the market is going to handle everything is naive. So, you're like a bit of an understatement.
Yeah.
I just want to say, though, I don't know. I feel like... I mean, I guess I've been kind of trying to defend the perspectives here, and more so the capitalist one because you had more problems with it. But
he also spoke a little more.
Yeah, he definitely spoke more. I just want to say that I really value both of their perspectives. I guess that's why I'm trying to put the case forward for what they're saying. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I really value everything that they brought to the table and said.
Oh, me too, absolutely, and not just like. Not in an anthropological way, even of being like, ooh, isn't that interesting? But like, I thought they were making sense in context. Also, this actually brings me to my final note on this, which is a problem that I have with anarchists in general. And I say this as a person who lightly identifies as an anarchist. If someone asked me if I was an anarchist and I thought it would somehow socially benefit me to say yes, I would. If I thought that it was going to negatively socially benefit me, I would say no, I'm not an anarchist. But it's not because I'm duplicitous. It's because no one's just one thing in all contexts. Yeah, because I don't believe in forced hierarchies or like a class society. And so that's where I come from. I'm a lowercase a anarchist. I don't believe in a forced hierarchy. Or an
but you just don't necessarily see a government as a forced hierarchy? Like, because when you say things like, oh, I like the UN, or maybe the democracy isn't so bad, I don't know. Like, just almost every anarchist sees like the government as the epitome of forced hierarchy.
There's different types of consent given to the government, I think, in different ways over time. And it's also partially an inherited situation because none of us created these governments. We were born into them. Right. And so it's more complicated than just simply a forced hierarchy. I think there's a lot of sub-thoughts and sub-discussions to be had on that. I don't like to just write things off like that, say the government is bad, because I feel like that's, again, a loser's script. It's not a winner's script. It's not something that's going to help you navigate the world and cause change. But I think that the ultimate question about anarchism isn't whether or not there'll be something called a quote government, because anytime that there's a structure to the society that's deliberate, I consider that government. And that's why I'm pro-government, because I believe we should have an intentional structure to society and we should have a chance at controlling our fate as a group. So the transition from our current world to a non-state society is what I have the biggest problem with in most anarchist discussions that I've been a part of. It seems like most of the time that the answer that I get when I say, how are we going to get there from here? I'm often told, okay, there's going to be a period of chaos and disorder. We need to have a collapse first. We need to have our society fail so this better society can kind of be risen its part. Have you heard that before too?
Well, usually it's that this society is doomed to collapse. We can't help it. It's because of, if you look throughout history, find a government that didn't end in collapse. You know what I mean? Like they all get overthrown, revolutionized, their governments collapse.
Well,
that's what they do over time.
First of all, it's such a nihilistic loser script perspective. But second, try to find any dissident group in history that took over and it worked.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's also no like history of anarchism that worked, unless you want to count all the hunter-gatherers who kind of had.
So no matter what, we're advocating for a new thing, like
either a government that actually works or a stateless society that actually works. We're all like gunning for the society that finally actually works.
Yeah. So I want to emphasize. Yes, I want to emphasize. The point is that it works. That's the point. If we all agreed that we're looking for something that works, instead of saying, oh, it has to be government, oh, it has to not be government, oh, it has to be this or that. The point is it has to work and it has to do certain things. And one of the things it has to do, the reason I have a problem with this nihilistic, the world is definitely going to end and that's how we have the transition, is because we have to, one of the things that society has to do in its organizational structure is protect children and the mothers of children. It's not a good ideology if you're not protecting children from death.
I agree. I have an idea for how I saw a transition to a post-scarcity society. And I feel like post-scarcity anarchism, there's an awesome book called Post-Scarcity Anarchism by Murray Bookchin. And
Bookchin?
Murray Bookchin. Bookchin.
Does he have like
a book on his chin?
Yeah, or like that the book came out of his chin, or his book is the shape of a chin, or his chin is the shape of a book.
I don't think his chin was the shape of a book.
That's too bad.
But I feel like a lot of the problematic areas between socialism and capitalism and governments would be solved if we had a society of abundance.
Post-scarcity, yo?
Yeah, post-scarcity. And my idea or my thought for a transition plan was that we needed to not bother with changing or abolishing government or trying to get rid of any of the current structures we have now. Like there's this wisdom in the diet field where they're like, instead of trying to stop eating all the things that are bad for you, just start drinking smoothies with kale in it, or start adding in good foods that you like and keep adding in good foods that you like. And eventually you just eat less and less of the crappy foods as you add in more good ones. Just don't think about that you're going to stop eating any particular thing. And if you really want to eat it, go eat it. You start adding in the good instead of like abolishing the bad. And so my thought for trying to build a post-scarcity society was you start by educating people and giving people the tools to create abundance in their own lives. And whether that begins with creating their own gardens and hydroponic things so that they have enough food and they can share with their neighbors or trade with their neighbors, and building
open source blueprints.
Yeah, open source blueprints. I had this guy on my podcast on Ponder Talk Radio when I was doing that. I had this guy who's part of this group called Open Source Communities, or I can't remember what the actual
open source ecology.
No, it's not that. They're awesome too, and they put up all these blueprints for like tractors and things like DIY stuff like that. But they're building intentional communities and they're open sourcing how they're doing it. Everything, the whole structure of their social systems and So I like the open source thing. I like the idea of creating abundance in your own area And eventually, if everybody has access to that information and begins doing it, if everybody is able to produce within their own communities and their own areas more than they need, that is by definition post-scarcity, and you can start collaborating on like bigger things and networking communities with other people who are producing abundance and trading with them and or giving to each other, gifting, a gift economy. I like the idea of gift economies.
Yeah, no, I really connected with that idea. It reminds me of this anarchist idea that I've read about, but I would totally botch trying to repeat, which is dual power, which is the idea of rising a alternative power structure alongside the existing structure and basically making it so it's like Buckminster Fuller said that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that is the diet advice. And
that's what you're talking about also with, post-scarcity and giving people the capacity to have their cups overfloweth, which came up in the debate also with the idea of needing to have a surplus before you can
be generous. Yeah.
Well, gosh, I guess what we got to admit at the end of the day is basically, I mean, no one who's expressed their ideas here today is going to be right in the eyes of history. There's not we all expressed some interesting perspectives and we made it like a stew of ideas that conflict and stuff like that. But it's not going to be like 100 years from now. People listen to it and they're like, oh, that one guy on that podcast was 100% right. And everyone else around him was just flopping fools.
I think what a true thing to say.
Yeah, that's the part of the podcast they're going to be like, damn.
He was right. None of them were right.
Well, thank you so much for listening today, everyone. And thank you very much to our guests for sharing their opinions and allowing yourselves to be on a podcast that ends with a guy disagreeing with you.
Even though they didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah, well, no disrespect intended. And I would love to speak to both of you. And if I said anything that you disagree with when you listen to this episode later, this is what I want to happen really, really bad. I want the two of you to debate me by myself, where you guys are on a team. You guys are on a team pro-anarchy. I'm on the team anti-anarchy. And we'll do an episode that subverts this episode and flips it on the head and shows that you guys are actually on the same team, because you really are.
Except they completely disagree with each other about everything except that the state should go away.
So I'm going to have to make like 2 rebuttals to every point they make.
Yes.
They're wrong. Oh my God, we're all so fucking wrong.
So that was it.
It's recorded so long ago. It's like, it felt like a different lifetime.
Yeah, it's literally true. I don't feel like my way of viewing the world has changed this much in this short of a time since starting to do this podcast at any other time in my life.
Yeah, I can really hear in myself that I was not being generous enough in my interpretations, and I was
right.
like erecting an enemy image. And I think that's fine. It's entertaining and funny and interesting. But we could have done better to merge the ideologies.
Well, at the time, I couldn't have done better. That was as good as I could do at the time. But now we can do better, and we will do better.
Oh, I mean, as a species, we could do better. To merge the
right.
It's like humanity.
yeah.
Like in the future at some point.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for listening. All the usual stuff. If you want to contact us, use the contact form. Tell us how awesome this was or how bad it was. Tell us what you want to hear. Tell us if you want to contribute something. Tell us. Send us a theme song and
show the podcast to your dad and mom. Say this is the kind of stuff I'm into these days, and just kind of see what they get. We've
been getting good parent response. Like people are showing this to their parents, and their parents are liking it. So maybe your parents will like it.
Yeah, I can confirm at least 5 parents have listened to this and provided positive feedback.
See, there you go. And of course, once again, check out both Robert and Cameron's work. There's links to their stuff in the description. Already talked about that earlier. Hooray! Love you. Mwah.
Seriously Wrong is a podcast for parents and children. 1,000 episodes, 1,000 years of world peace.
Anarchist insurrection, bro.
Any day now.
Hey, that's nice yoga mat. I've been wanting to get upgrade. I just have a crappy old one.
Yeah, this is
really cool.
This is brand new, top of the line. I use it for my vinyasa flow.
Oh yeah, you like to do vinyasa flow classes? Yeah, I'm all about the Ashtanga.
That's so crazy because vinyasa flow is really
I just think Ashtanga is a better workout and a better. It's more cleansing to the soul. Of course, I've tried Vinyasa Flow. You don't know who you're talking to.
It doesn't sound like you've really tried Vinyasa Flow, because if you've done Vinyasa Flow, you know.
Ashtanga is like the original OG shit though. It's not like this westernized, bastardized Vinyasa Flow they give now. I'm a spiritual person,
if
and
you want to be in the past.
I have spiritual aspirations, and I'm a spiritual authority, and so therefore I just know that the shit you're doing.
If you want to do yoga like it's settler times.
Well, yeah, like ancient wisdom, bro.
The future is Vinyasa Flow, man, and I will fight about that.
The dystopian future.
It's accessible.
It's it's accessible, it's easy, it's drive-through, but it doesn't satisfy the soul. It doesn't. It's not eating a really great meal full of nutrients and love, a home-cooked meal that your grandmother made that she poured her heart and soul into. Vinyasa Flow is how can we turn this into a piece of shit Western corporation thing?
Ashtanga yoga is like Ronald Reagan, and Vinyasa Flow is like Robin Williams. Vinyasa Flow brings families together. It's part of all of our childhoods. It lights up any living room. It's for everyone, but it's authentic. It's deeply authentic, and it's one of the greatest performers of all time.
Here, how about instead of physically fighting, why don't we go and sit and meditate together about this?
Yeah, and in Vinyasa Flow we don't do that. So
it's not. I prefer to physically fight. It's not in it. It's just I'm a spiritual person. So
I am a purist, and anyone who's not pure is not welcome.
And you don't know how to meditate. Hey, I saw your pin, equal rights for all genders. I think that's great. That's my philosophy too.
I believe that just no matter what your gender is, no matter what your race is, no matter what class you're in, we all deserve equal economic, political, and social rights.
Isn't that just something so many more people need to acknowledge? Sad to say, and it's great to meet support out there.
I put the pin on, and I was like, I'm going out in the world. I hope someone notices this pin, and this is kind of my dream come true, to meet another feminist. We're both out in public, and it's feminist sees another feminist, and now we're hanging out. It's new feminist friend. This is perfect. I'm walking in public with my pin. You see the pin and you see oh, that's another feminist. It's I'm gonna go up and we can talk about feminism because we're both feminists.
Wait. I mean, I understand the historical necessity of the feminist movement at the time when it began, but now I think that it's sort of we're post-feminism and we can move on to just equal rights for everybody. I prefer to just be a humanitarian or an equalist, or I care about people and humans.
Stop talking. Okay, never talk again.
Okay,
never talk again.
I'm stopping.
Stop.
But I just think that
no.
I really love all people.
It's not up to me to qualify this. You just have to listen. Okay.
Hey, can you hand me that pencil sharpener?
Yeah, here you go.
Oh, I only like ones that sharpen when you turn clockwise, not counterclockwise. Sorry, I won't use this one.